Olá, pessoal. Só confirmando que todo mundo me ouve direitinho aí. Sim? Ok. Nós estamos hoje aqui, com um intérprete de Libras, que vai nos acompanhar na palestra com a Jenny. Nós gostaríamos de dar boas-vindas a todos vocês que estão conosco aqui hoje. Muito obrigada por nos acompanhar, ouvindo hoje aqui essa palestra tão esperada, né? Acredito que vocês estão aí acompanhando a programação do IHC como um todo. Então, eu já vou dizer para vocês que a palestra da Jenny, como vocês estão esperando, né, vai ser em inglês, mas nós temos aqui um outro canal de transmissão, certo? Que se vocês quiserem acessar, tá aqui nos comentários afixado. A gente tem um link em que você pode ir para ouvir a tradução em português, certo? Da palestra dela. Então, aqui a palestra dela vai ser em inglês, não vai ter legenda, mas se vocês forem para lá, vocês podem ter a versão traduzida, ok? Então, a partir de agora, para que ela nos entenda, eu vou falar em inglês e vocês podem fazer perguntas no chat durante toda a palestra dela. A gente vai coletar e vai fazer as perguntas todas no final, ok? Então, vou falar em inglês agora para que ela nos entenda. So, welcome everyone to the first keynote of the 20th Brazilian Symposium on Human Factors in Computer Systems. We are pleased to have you all here today and share our keynote speeches and panels that you can watch here on YouTube every day this week. Our keynote speaker today is Professor Jennifer Preece. Anyone involved with human-computer interaction has heard of her or learned from the book she co-authored, Interaction Design, a book usually adopted in our HCI classes in Brazil. She's a professor and Dean Emerita in the Information School at the University of Maryland, USA. She is particularly interested in how interaction design and human-computer interaction can support citizen science projects. Currently, she is the principal investigator of community-driven environmental projects funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation. She is a SIGCHI Fellow, author of a broad collection of published articles, and co-author of Interaction Design Beyond HCI, now in its 5th edition. She's a member of the Citizen Science Association and editor-in-chief of Citizen Science Theory and Practice. She's a board member of Vancouver's Stanley Park Ecology Society. So now we are going to listen to Jenny's talk. Jenny, we are very thrilled to have you today in our symposium, in our 20th edition. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and sharing your exciting research with us.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for that nice introduction to Cian, and thank you to the interpreter. I always love watching signings, so I get a little distracted. As Tizian said, I'm from the University of Maryland, but this screen is not Maryland. I'm living in Vancouver, in Canada, and this is one of the views close by. I've been here since the beginning of COVID, but we're also spending much more time here. It's a very beautiful city, but it is cold at the moment. And I'm wishing that I was with all of you because I've always had a wonderful time in Brazil and enjoyed being in Brazil and meeting many Brazilian colleagues. And before I start my presentation, I just want to rather quickly show you a picture of some of the colleagues that I've met from Brazil and a very nice dinner after the first Brazilian HCI conference 20 years ago. So coming back to talk to you now is just a real honor. And I wish I was actually with you, but I hope you'll have a really fabulous conference. I want to give just a little bit more background about myself, although Tizian has done a wonderful job. Yeah, that's our 5th edition of the book, which I think some of you perhaps know. And we will be working on the 6th edition pretty soon, actually. I'll just go back one. No, that's okay. We will be working on the 6th edition pretty soon. So if you have some comments, I think you can find my email, and things that you would like us to take into account, then do please send them to me. As Tizian said, I'm also editor-in-chief of a journal called Citizen Science Theory and Practice, which I enjoy working on very much. And I'm hoping that some of you may actually, after this presentation, or maybe you're thinking about it now, will submit papers to this journal. There are a number of different categories of papers, from research to case studies, to methodologies, to opinion pieces. It's a range of different things. So hopefully, if you're into citizen science and HCI, then you'll consider submitting there. Okay, let's move forward. And as Tizian said, I'm also a board member of Stanley Park Ecology Society. It's a very beautiful park, very close to Vancouver, and it's influencing a lot how I think about using citizen science. Let's move forward. So the plan for this talk, what I want to do is outline a little bit what citizen science and community science are. Then I want to talk about a community-developed environmental project that we're doing at the University of Maryland with two other universities. Then I want to move into talking a little bit about crowdsourcing and machine learning, because I know everybody's into AI at the moment, so is citizen science. And then talk a little bit about data verification, because of course citizen science uses the name science, so we have to be concerned about the quality of the data that's collected. And then I'll end with a few suggestions for future research, in the hope that I can encourage some of you who maybe are thinking about moving into applying your HCI skills to citizen science to think about some of these topics. And then I'll finish with some concluding thoughts. So citizen science broadly is a partnership between scientists and volunteers to collect and analyze data, to plan and develop projects, to communicate findings. And in terms of our current sort of activity in citizen science, certainly in America and in Europe, and I think in Brazil too, we have thought about citizen science mainly from about 2009, with pioneers like Jonathan Silverton from the British Open University and Rick Bonney from the US Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And of course, that sort of coincided with a huge development in apps of all kinds of different kinds of apps that enable us to collect data from across the world remotely and in large amounts, which we couldn't easily do before apps were readily available across the world to many people. But citizen science really has its roots much deeper than that. Some of us like to say it goes right back to Darwin, but it probably also goes right back to Aristotle. And like many disciplines, like HCI itself, and if you've been involved for HCI for some time, you will, realize that there have been some changes in the name of human-computer interaction over the years. At one point, it used to be called human-machine interaction or man-machine interaction. And the same thing happens in many disciplines. So it's happening in citizen science too, but this time for slightly different reasons. But it's all about diversity and making everyone feel like they're welcome and that they have something to contribute to the discipline. So Audubon, the Bird Society for America, actually wrote this in 2018 as part of Audubon's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. We have transitioned from using the term citizen science to the more inclusive term community science. No matter where a volunteer was born or how they came to the United States, we value their contribution to our science and conservation. And I mentioned this, I'm actually going to use the term citizen science throughout because it's a bit laborious to say citizen and community science every single time. But actually, when I say citizen science, it includes everybody. And in many respects, it is community science. So this is a debate that's going on, I think, within the discipline. So let's move forward and look at the next slide. And so there are many, many different kinds of citizen science projects, and they arrive for all kinds of different reasons. They usually use technology in some form or other, but in this particular case, this was a project to save these birds, which are called swifts. And the reason it became important was that these birds from about 1995 onwards, the numbers in Edinburgh and Scotland had been declining. And so people did research into why that was. And the reason is that partly habitat change, partly climate change, and partly lack of nesting boxes. So they built nesting boxes to support the swifts. So that's one kind of citizen science project. But let's look at a few more. This one is from Brazil, and I'm very proud of the fact that this is a publication in our Citizen Science Theory and Practice Journal. I don't know if Alexandrino and any of his co-authors are actually in the audience, but this is a project entitled Challenges in Engaging Birdwatchers in Bird Monitoring in a Forest Patch, Lessons for Future Citizen Science Projects in Agricultural Landscapes. So these are the kinds of things that people are working on. And if we move forward again, you will see that there are, in fact, there are many projects, and I'm sure you're aware of many more than I am, that are happening all across Brazil. But this particularly took my attention. It's a global international project called the GLOBE program. And it's looking at all kinds of different projects across the world and trying to bring together international teams. And here is one that is being led by Brazil. So moving forward again. And of course, citizen science has become really linked to ecotourism. It's probably been slowed down a bit recently because of the COVID pandemic and people not being able to travel. But, getting a riverboat down the Amazon to look at the various fauna and flora there, or traveling across to Africa or many parts of the world, ecotourism is now linking with various citizen science projects and engaging technology to record data about the flora and the fauna that have seen. And of course, Brazil has amazing ecological systems, the Amazon and the Pantanal, and many other areas as well that are known to you probably and not so well known to me. But as I understand it, Brazil, and I think particularly Pantanal, is suffering from some climate change. And of course, parts of the Amazon, I think, are suffering from the need for people to have more space and transport through it. So I think we in HCI have a very big role to take to help in some of these projects and to make it possible for everyday people, all of us, to get involved and to learn about the organisms in their countries where they live and to collect data about them. So let's move forward. And this was a little diagram that I constructed in 2016, 5 years ago now, which looks at some of the areas that I think are of particular interest to people in human-computer interaction. And I chose these because I think it sums up the range of things that we from human-computer interaction can contribute to. And the first one, I think community, is probably very attractive to those people in HCI who are more interested in, why do people participate? Why do they use this software? How inclusive is it? Does it cater for persons who maybe have physical or emotional or mental disabilities as well as for everyone else? Is it treating the population equally? So there's all kinds of things to do with communities that I think are really important in the broad socio-technical design of systems. data I mentioned at the beginning. Could we go back 1 second, please, on the slides? Data I mentioned at the beginning is really important because we're interested in data quality, data sharing, ownership, and the veracity of that data. So I'm going to come back to that. Technology, well, we all have ideas about that, you know, what to use, for what purpose, where to use it, what kind of input devices, particularly as more and more technology becomes available to us. And design, how can we design to maybe include crowdsourcing, not just by people, but with technology and people and the technology working together. And all of this can help our planet. And HCI has a huge role in contributing to these efforts, particularly as we're all thinking about climate change and habitat loss and loss of biodiversity. So let me move to a project that we've been working on, community developed environmental projects. This project has been running for about 6 years now. It's the NSF, an NSF funded project, and it involves 3 universities, the University of Maryland, University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and the University of Colorado, Boulder. And I think that before saying any more about that, the best way for you to see and get a feel for this project is to look at the video that I hope is going to work. So let's run the video.
This project is centered around understanding what happens when we start paying closer attention to plants and animals, waterways, parks, and backyards. Researchers at the University of Maryland, the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and the University of Colorado are working with community partners at 2 local nature centers, the Anacostia Watershed Society and the Reedy Creek Nature Center, to develop technology to support a deeper understanding of and more engagement with local environments.
The tool we are developing is called NatureNet. It helps communities carry out projects in their own local environments.
In Maryland and the District of Columbia, volunteer watershed stewards learn about improving the health of the Anacostia River by creating projects to manage stormwater runoff. NatureNet helps them map, capture, and share information about their projects with each other and the public. At Reedy Creek Nature Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, naturalists develop projects that will help park visitors to use their mobile phones to collect data to understand more about nature in the park. Visitors can come in from the trails to see their observations and those from other visitors on a large interactive screen at the kiosk. We are now studying the impact of NatureNet on people's knowledge of local environmental issues and actions, their understanding of science in their everyday lives, their sense of connection with nature, and their scientific, computational, and technology skills. Are you interested in joining forces with others in your community to better understand and protect local places? Then NatureNet may be the tool you need. What is NatureNet? NatureNet is designed to evolve in response to users who recommend new projects and technology improvements through the Design Ideas feature. We think this is a first, crowdsourcing to guide the evolution of a location-based citizen science platform. And now, we're encouraging its adoption and adaptation in many other outdoor settings, from parks to environmental stewardship programs to your own backyard. Here's how you can get started. Participants in NatureNet can also influence the design of technology that they use by offering design ideas, which they can input via the app or website. Interested in learning more about the impact of NatureNet? You can read more on our website, download the apps, or check out our research website, research.nature-net.org, where you can track the use of our system through real-time visualizations, and follow our project on social media. We hope that NatureNet will expand and support data collection and communication around environmental issues that matter to you and your neighborhood. Help make a difference in your local environment. Contribute your nature observations to NatureNet today.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the slide after that. A few slides forward, up to the slide 18. That's great. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's the one. So I hope that video gives you a little bit of idea about what that project was about. Like many funded projects, the funding for that project actually ran out almost 2 years ago, and we don't have the funding to continue to maintain it. So it's not available for general use at the moment, but I hope the video gave you some idea of the kinds of things that we were trying to do and the kinds of things we were thinking about. And in doing that, we developed a little, very simple participatory design or co-design model. And I was thinking about this in terms of, how do we map between technology and what people actually want? So way back, this used to be called task analysis, and it went through various different forms, and it was reinvented as activity analysis and various other things. I think of it as just having to make a constant effort in these large projects with a broad group of users in trying to map and understand what the users want and how the technology might map onto it. So when we started, we thought we had a pretty good idea, and we thought that our technology mapped according to D, for example, where the technology and the users' needs are quite closely mapped together. We knew what they wanted, we thought, and we knew how we were going to design for it. But at various times, different groups within this broad community project wanted different things. So sometimes, what we were doing with one particular group might be represented more clearly by A, in which the blue users and the red technology did not overlap. They did not coincide. Or maybe B, where they coincided a little bit, or C. And so it was a constant kind of effort to make sure that we were checking with different groups of users and with our design to try and make sure that we were designing the kind of technology that they actually wanted. And that was very hard. So let's move on, and I'll say a little bit more about that. Going to the methods slide. One forward. Right. So thinking about methods, the methods that we used were sort of co-design, participatory design, and usability testing. And of course, like many of you, we were doing our co-design with different groups of users and testing frequently. And we also, as you heard in the video, we also tried a few different things, because crowdsourcing at that time had hit the HCI world. And so people through things like Mechanical Turk and others were exploring crowdsourcing for tasks. So we thought, we could crowdsource design ideas to enable people remotely, as well as our co-design partners, to tell us how they would like their designs to work, what kind of functionality they would like. And we also use that, of course, as a data collection method. And we did a large amount of observation and interviews. It was a very deeply ethnographic project. One of my co-workers, Tammy Clegg, you saw in the video, Tammy is a very strong and deep ethnographer. So we've really focused on trying to understand our users and to deliver the technology that they wanted. Okay, next slide, please. So what we learned an awful lot, because this project went on for a long time. And it's actually hard to describe what we learned in a very concise way. But we did learn the real importance of deeply understanding our participants and realizing that we had a very broad range of different kinds of participants. And one of the things that we learned, which was sort of obvious, but a hard lesson to learn, was that people coming to nature parks, some of them want to leave their technology behind. Some of them are extremely interested in using technology that they're very familiar with, and some of them are eager to try out new technology. And some of them don't want to try any new technology because they want to only use things that work really well. So in this whole broad socio-technical system, we were trying to deeply understand what it was that our participants wanted. And although we all say this in HCI, I can't overstate how important that was, we had to adapt our co-design methods. And as I mentioned, one way of adapting them was to do remote encouragement for people to submit design ideas. We realized also that we had to be extremely careful with our terminology. So, for example, we all thought at the beginning that people would know what a design idea is. But no, they didn't. So we had to give them examples of design ideas. And even more than that, we realized that many people are shy. I'm sure some of you are, and I certainly am. And some people weren't sure if their design idea was a reasonable idea. Was it a sensible idea? Had somebody else already suggested it? Would they be laughed at by other people? Or was it just a simple usability fix? We were interested in all of these things, but actually, unlike often when people speak to you, if they have to put something in writing and send it to you, they feel a bit more shy about doing it. So that was a big lesson for us. Also, the complexity of working with a community. Communities are big, and they are very variable, as I mentioned earlier, in the kinds of people that are working there. So this is the kind of project that is extremely exciting to do, but of course it's not a project where, a single PhD student should work on their own. They have to be part of a team and a big group where people work together. And the other thing is, of course, in HCI, we keep coming back to this, but sometimes when we're in the depths of doing our projects, we forget theory can really help. And sometimes that theory comes from outside of the discipline. And on this particular occasion, I mentioned Tammy Clegg. We got interested in a theory called the third place. And it's a theory that was first written about by Ray Oldenburg in a book called The Great Good Place. At least that's when it became popular. And very briefly, third place theory talks about how people's first place is where they live, how people's second place is where they work, and how people's third place is where they go for leisure, coffee bars and things like this. Well, you can probably see where this is leading, and it fits back with what I said at the beginning about people's interests vary considerably. If you've been working hard and you go into a nature center to relax, hear birds, enjoy the environment, you may not want to work with technology. The other thing that's extremely interesting is that we, of course, underestimated that some people's third place, the visitors, was, for other people, the second place. The educators, the managers, the people who were the directors of the nature reserve. So we learned these things, and at the moment, I can't tell you too much more about those because we're right in the depths of probably writing the longest paper I've ever been involved with. We've been working on this for over a year as a team and trying to really crystallize what we found from this project. But the sort of leaving message, I think, is to be very attuned to the variations of people in your group, think about technology carefully, and to look widely at theories that can help you, particularly from the social sciences. Okay, let's move on to the next section. So I want to talk a little bit about crowdsourcing and machine learning because everybody's into AI, and of course people in HCI are, and so are people in citizen science. And increasingly we're getting large numbers of people with HCI skills coming into citizen science, which is really thrilling for me. So that's what I want to talk about next. And several of you will know this system because I've talked about it in other talks a long time ago, and it's still there. It's an app called iNaturalist. It's pretty fantastic. You can use it on your phones, different phones. You can download it to your laptop, your tablet. in many ways. And iNaturalist is really interesting and really inspiring. And one of the reasons it inspires me is because iNaturalist was started in about 2009. And if you can see from the screen that this was a screenshot that I took recently. It's got about over 62 million observations from a very large number of different participants, 4 million or more participants, making all these observations. But believe it or not, iNaturalist was started in 2009 by 3 master's students from the University of Berkeley. I find that fantastic. And over the years, what is it now, 12 years later, some of those students are still involved in iNaturalist. iNaturalist has now got a lot more funding, of course. It's funded by National Geographic. It's funded by Sloan. It's funded by the National Science Foundation in the US. It's funded by a lot of individuals like me and you and others. And it's a pretty incredible kind of system. And what iNaturalist does, it allows you to collect. You can go out with your phone and you can take pictures of organisms and you can report those organisms, and they're collected in a huge, huge database. But of course, there are some issues with this in that, sometimes people wonder about the veracity of the data, how good that data is. And iNaturalist actually attends to that very closely. And you can look at this next screen, which shows you one kind of data. This is a butterfly that happens, it's called a red admiral, that happens to be found in much of Europe. And it's a British butterfly that I'm particularly fond of. And you can see that it shows the distribution, both in terms of which months when the butterfly is actually found, and you can see the areas in the world in which it's found, and you can get information about how many people have submitted, who submitted most recently, and different amounts of data like that. And you can do that for many, many organisms, and there are many Brazilian people who are involved in using iNaturalist. Tends to be birders who are particularly energetic, but iNaturalist has people working on it from all the different groups of animals and plants and even fungi. So let's go to the next slide. And one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is that if you imagine this huge amount of data from iNaturalist, over 62 million observations that have also logged the date, the time, the location, who collected that data, and who else agreed with the classification of the organism by listening to a sound recording or looking at a photograph, and who verified or helped others to identify it. There's a huge, huge store of data. And this is where I think those of you who are interested in machine learning and AI can really think about this particular example and how you might apply it maybe to other examples or use this technology and modify it for use in Brazil. We've for years now used machine vision to identify leaves from plants and birders, even from pictures that might only show a part of a bird. Those machine vision has been used for identifying species for a long time. And so when you have this big amount of data, you have a huge amount for machine learning to work on. And this app uses the crowdsourced data from iNaturalist to pump it and make it available to children who use an app called Seek. And this is extremely important because Seek is specially designed for kids. Teenagers and others are often using iNaturalist, and some younger people. But the nice thing about Seek is it offers challenges that iNaturalist doesn't. So let's move to the next slide. And you see 10-year-old Nina, and Nina is out for a walk in a park close by to where I live. called Pacific Spirit, and she has an iPhone with her, and she is wanting to know what this particular fern is. So she's pointing her iPhone camera at the phone, and Seek is looking at that image and comparing it with the data that it's got for this region, in this place, around this time of year, for ferns of this type. And it actually sends a message to Nina, next slide, telling her to look at the fern, and it suggests that it's a deer fern, and it suggests that she takes a picture of it. And so she can take a picture using her cell phone camera, and the fern is, this picture is recorded in her recordings on her part of the system, and she maybe is told to collect 3 ferns or 5 plants growing in the forest or 3 insects, and so she gets different challenges, and then she gets rewards in the form of badges for looking at these things. Now, Nina was doing this during the time of COVID, and she was extremely motivated. She was going out into her back garden. She was going out on walks with her parents, and she just loved this app. And this data can also be recorded in iNaturalist. Sometimes it doesn't always give you the exact species. Sometimes it just gives you the group. And of course, it does rely on other people being in the area and the iNaturalist having that data in its database that it can give to children. And the special thing about this app is that this app is completely safe for children. It's sort of isolated. Other people can't get involved in it like they can in iNaturalist. So parents are very happy about this kind of application because they know their kids are safe. It's completely self-contained. Let's go to the next slide. So that brings me, safety is a big issue for children, but in any of this kind of citizen science work that harnesses HCI, uses HCI, data verification is a really important thing, because citizen science or community science, I keep referring back to this, is a science. So science relies on good quality data. So let's talk a little bit about data verification. Next slide. Thank you. So this is another app that I'm sure some of the enthusiastic Brazilian birders know about. In fact, I know they do because I've seen birds from Brazil reported in this app. And so with eBird, which comes from Cornell, they have many millions of observations of birds from across the world. Incredible. People are using eBird throughout South America, throughout Africa, Europe, North America, everywhere. And again, individuals can collect their own data, but they give this data to the scientific community. And so in order to give it to the scientific community for scientific research, the data needs to be of good quality. Now, if you're only a so-so birder like me, you sometimes make mistakes. So there needs to be a system to make sure that that data is of good quality. And this is where HCI people and others can really be helpful. Let's move to the next slide. Now, this is a bit of a personal story from my life in Vancouver, in that I went out bird watching, and I saw this bird called the grackle, which is a bit of an aggressive looking bird, but there was only one of them. And I spotted this bird, and I didn't get a particularly good look at it, but I did get a sort of photograph of it, and I reported it. And I reported it on eBird, and I didn't really see its tail because there was vegetation in the way. And I reported it as a common grackle. Well, within a day, I had got a message from an expert in the field, because there are various experts around that help novices like me and also check their data. And I got this very nice, polite message back that said, we know that bird. We know that actual bird. That bird's been around for a couple of weeks, but it's not a common grackle. Try and find it again and look at its tail. It's actually a boat-tailed grackle. Now, could you please go into eBird and change your record so that it's recorded as a boat-tailed grackle? So the important point that I want to make about that is that whether you're interested in birds or something completely different, is that how technology-oriented people, and particularly, HCI people, can think of ways of bringing experts and novices, whatever kind of system you're looking at, maybe a geographic system or looking at the stars or looking at plants or, any of these things, how you can bring experts and novice citizen scientists together to help the novices learn and also to make sure the data is of good quality. So there's big challenges there, I think, for HCI researchers. Let's move on to the next slide. So I mentioned Jonathan Silverton at the beginning, and this is quite an old example, but it's again another example of a kind of experiment of data verification that brings together experts and technical systems. In the early days of iSpot in 2009, of course, there was big debate about, citizen science, and scientists were quite quick to say, people who are ordinary citizens are not trained in science. Can they really collect accurate data? And this is still a big debate in some areas, but I think people are realizing increasingly that, yes, they can. And this was an early experiment done in 2009, where the iSpot research group took a sample of 2,234 plants and 1,053 moths, and they sent them to the UK Records Centre, where there were experts who did the same classification without knowing how the citizens had made their recordings, and they got 94% accuracy for plants and 92% for moths, which I think is pretty incredible. And of course, there's plenty of room to build more on that, but that gives you a kind of idea of how technology and people can work together to collect accurate data. So let's move on to the next to last slide, where I said I would like to suggest, and I hope I'm okay on time, a few suggestions for future research for you, and particularly for the students out there who may be looking for projects. First one would be to help to define socio-technical systems, these big systems for citizen science projects, the kind of thing I talked about with our community development activity, not a single student's project, but maybe a big research team's project. Developing techniques for ensuring the efficacy, the quality of data. Now that could be a PhD student's project working in an applied area. That could be geographical information systems. It could be data that's collected by drones and then classified by people, various things like that. And then to design and harness machine learning and AI for citizen science, machine vision using and machine learning using these very large bodies of data. And things like iNaturalist and eBird, you can go to their sites, you can see their data, you can download their data, you can use it. You can also see, particularly on eBird, a fantastic range of data visualization tools. So if you're into data visualization, that could be a nice project for you. To develop new input devices and to look at the data that's collected through those. Sometimes they might be small hardware devices that, for example, a lens that goes on front of a camera. There could be an HCI component to that, how to make it work, how to focus it with on the camera, various ideas. And then the last one I want to mention, which I found particularly ingenious, is that during the COVID time, when people living in suburbia, as I do, or people living in cities, were noticing that there were many more species getting reported. And they did some distribution maps where, again, if you're into data visualization. As an HCI person, you could contribute. And they found that some species that were not seen in particular areas have returned, because now there are fewer cars, there are fewer people, less airplane noise, all of those things. So looking at the distribution of organisms and being an HCI specialist who actually helps to in projects like that, and maybe helps on the visualization tools to make those sorts of investigation. So let's move to the very last slide, and then we can discuss. So I just wanted to give you a few concluding thoughts. Citizen science really brings people together to learn about nature and to contribute to science. And HCI has an amazingly important role in tool design and system design to support citizen science. Most citizen science projects are still typically led by people in the sciences, although anthropologists are increasingly getting involved, and sociologists and historians looking at records, but they need HCI people. We need systems that are usable for the public, and HCI has a huge role to play in this. So participation in HCI changes, and participation in citizen science changes, and HCI can help to respond to that. And I think we need to think big. HCI and citizen science together, I think, really helped save our planet during this time of climate change and habitat loss and loss of biodiversity. And we in HCI, it's time we started thinking about HCI and citizen science as being the third scientific revolution in which we really help to save our planet and to save the species for future generations. And HCI has a huge role in doing that. So I hope some of you will take on that challenge, and I hope you have some ideas from this talk. And let's look at the last slide, because I'd like to end by thanking all the organizers for inviting me to give this talk, my NatureNet teams and the US National Science Foundation. And thank you to the sign language interpreters. I can't help looking to you. Occasionally I've got lost in my discussion because I've been so busy looking at them. And it's like, thank you to our mediator, Ariane. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks to all of you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for the much inspiring talk you just gave us. I'd like to ask you a few questions from the audience, but we also have some messages here just for you. So I'll put it on the screen. We have a message from Raquel Preece.
Would you like to, first of all, Tiziana, I pronounced your name wrong at the end, and I'm very sorry about that. It's just lovely having you here, and she's been amazingly helpful in helping me with some technology problems at the beginning. May I ask you to just direct the questions, take control and direct the questions to me? That would be lovely.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I have just a comment here from Raquel Preece. She says, thanks, Jenny, for being back in IHC, our symposium. We feel honored to have you as a keynote once again.
So let me just, Raquel, it's lovely to see you. And I just hope that your job up in the north of Brazil is still going really well. And I can see from your image that your hair has changed like mine, and maybe it's grown through COVID. My hair was only down to here at the beginning of the pandemic. So it's just lovely to see you again. And as I said at the beginning, it was so terrific to look at some of the photographs of some interactions from 20 years ago, and also more recently with my Brazilian friends. So I hope to see you again soon, Raquel.
We have a question in Portuguese. I will translate it to you. Regina is asking, how can I be a collaborator of this project, the project we showed the video?
Is the question, can you be a collaborator?
Can she be a collaborator at the project?
This project has actually ended So the National Science Foundation money has ended. And so we're not maintaining the websites. But we are working on a final paper, a very big paper. It's the longest in duration paper I've ever been involved in. And when that comes out, if you write to me, I would be, or when we have a draft, I would be super happy if you wanted to comment on it. The other thing you could do is there are various other projects that I would recommend that you maybe look at Global, which was one of the sites that I showed at the beginning, which describes some of these big community projects that are happening across the world. And it may be possible for you to get involved with one of those. And the one I showed you about mosquitoes, it seems to be, from what I can see from the website, seems to be led by Brazilians. So that maybe is a good starting point for you. But certainly if you would like to send me an email, and if you would like to see drafts of the paper, it won't be ready for another couple of months, but it would be very nice to have you involved.
So Regina, enjoy the opportunity. We have also a comment from Patricia. She says, catching kids' attention and connecting kids, knowledge, and nature. She loves the idea of that project.
I'm not sure how she sells Patricia. I think that's the Brazilian. Is that the Brazilian way to say it? Take a look at Seek. I don't know if I should have checked. I don't know if there is a Portuguese language version, but I think there is for iNaturalist, and it really depends on the age of the kids that you're working with, because iNaturalist, you could probably work with, certainly 12-year-olds, but 10-year-olds, they'd need some guidance. But for younger children, Seek might be terrific. And I recommend you to look at it because, it's a safe app for children, and that's a really important thing. And my experience of working with Nina was that she just loved using Seek. She's not used it so much this year. She's moved on to other things, but she was really quite addicted. Every walk we went on, she was using it a lot. So have a look at Seek. And there are many other apps around, as you probably know, but Seek and iNaturalist are two that they are well maintained. They have a big user base, and they're completely used across the world. So, if any of us ever get to travel again, you can go somewhere else. You can keep a record of what you see in different parts of Brazil or different parts of South America or wherever you go.
We have now a couple of questions of PhD students and candidates, much interested in themes. So, Diogenes asks, he says, thank you, Professor Preece. Considering today's social issues beyond sustainability, for example, fake news, how can citizen science help to improve participatory design, citizenship, and civic participation?
Thank you. That's a lovely question. Fake news. Fake news is just terrible. Let me focus on the other bits of it and think a little bit more about citizen science in general. And I would recommend you maybe to do some, I don't know how you pronounce your name, Diogenes. I would recommend that you maybe do some Google searches and look particularly at community science, because as I mentioned in the beginning, there is a huge move among many people. My group and the people who are responsible for submitting to the journal that I run, the Citizen Science Journal that I'm the editor-in-chief for, who are very concerned about making sure that citizen science is equitable, and we include everybody, and anybody who wants to contribute is welcome. And so the community science movement has really taken that on. And so I would say that, looking at what's happening in community science, which in some parts of citizen science, it's still somewhat dominated by, or at least led by academics. But community science is really pushing outwards to involve anybody who is interested in it, and can be involved in not just the participatory activity of science, but also participatory citizenship. So I happen to have talked a lot about the stuff that interests me and the biodiversity issues and related to climate change. But there are local groups with all kinds of different local projects. And these include people who are concerned about, for example, water quality, looking at, industrialization and water that's maybe used by industry and is released into the river. So there are people, local groups, who are looking at that and collecting data and using that data to lobby their local government. So, for example, the project that I talked about worked with a group called the Anacostia Watershed, and that's a river that runs through the eastern part of the District of Columbia and the eastern part of Maryland. It's traditionally been an area where people with poorer people have lived, with not a lot of income, and poorer people, new immigrants to the United States, have lived. And people there have collected a lot of data about water that's been used for cooling in the power plants and then pumped into the river. And then they have used that data to lobby their local government to make sure that the industrial uses of this water for cooling is not going to harm the natural environment and not going to make drinking water unable, so that people can't drink it. And even on a sort of more obvious basis, there are groups of people who are collecting evidence about trash, particularly plastic, in rivers and streams and in the ocean, and getting together to clean special beaches, which the stuff that I've been interested in is cleaning them for organisms, but of course cleaning them for kids, cleaning them for humans to use those beaches. So there's a whole set of things that are outside of, if you like, science, which are to do with participatory citizenship and civic participation, that I think are very interesting and important. And I think some of the ideas that I hope I talked about, particularly getting the use of technology with people, not taking people out, but the use of technology and people to collect data, to crowdsource that data. It does a couple of things, as well as having the data so that you can complain to the authorities. It involves people in interacting with each other, in getting to know each other, in forming a civic group, and it helps to educate people. Why do we care about whether plastic is dropped into our streams? It doesn't look very nice, but what's the problem? Why do we care about the water that's coming out from the power station being warmer than the water in the stream? What does it do? What's the problems? We can't see any chemicals in the water. Is it really clean? Well, maybe we should learn to test it. So there's projects like that, and there's also projects that look at, the history of small groups. So local towns' history, and many people get involved in that. Sometimes it involves, machine learning of trying to translate historical record using machine learning. But sometimes you also usually need people to look at the translation and say, oh no, that word's completely wrong. That wasn't a town, that was something completely different. So there's a tremendous opportunity for those of you interested in HCI to bring together, your HCI skills with your desire to improve participatory citizenship and civic participation. So it's a wonderful project. There's lots that you can do.
It's a lot of insights now for everyone. We have, Jenny, a couple more questions, but I know we have already extrapolated a little the time we gave you, so I don't know if we could do like maybe one or two more questions, or we can also wrap it up. That's not a problem.
It's fine with me. It's really up to you. I'm leaving it to you as the manager.
Really okay, so I have here another student question, and I know she's looking for a PhD team, and maybe it's a little related with what Diogenes asked. Nayana is asking, Professor Preece, what do you think would be opportunities and challenges in using citizen science in the context of Internet of Things?
Wow. So Internet of Things, many different devices and different kinds of input devices, many different kinds of machines, many things that typically don't come under what we think of as a laptop and a cell phone and the things that we're regularly using. So things like washing machines and smart devices and little robotic devices and all kinds of different things. Is that how you're seeing Internet of Things that are all being linked together? Good. Okay. So challenges in using citizen science in the context of Internet of Things. That's a pretty challenging question.
It's complex, right? It's a lot.
Yeah, I think there are techniques from citizen science which you could be using. So, for example, maybe you want to classify what is in the Internet of Things. So maybe there are ideas where you could build an app and you could really look at the range of Internet of Things, and you could develop a classification and a database of the Internet of Things. And then you could look at how the Internet of Things changes over a period of time, over a year, over 2 years, maybe how it's influenced by, I don't know, new technical developments, or how the Internet of Things how the things are being linked together by who and to do what, maybe there's some ideas in that. What do you think? Let's put that back to maybe some of the audience. What do you think?
If anybody wants to answer, I'll be looking right there. We have, while people type, I have here the answer from Raquel. She says, thanks, Jenny. Hope to see you in person
that's
soon.
great. Yeah. Thank you, Raquel. Hope to see you soon too.
Continue. She says, Jenny, thank you very much for your talk. Very inspiring. You have talked about methods, using and analyzing data. One challenge in creating citizen science systems is deploying it, getting people involved in critical mass, especially nowadays, as there are so many apps available trying to get users to adopt them.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And you remember that little 4-part diagram that goes back to 2015, and the first one, 2016, the first one I mentioned was community. Raquel, there's quite a lot of papers, if people are interested in this, in the journal Citizen Science Theory and Practice. In fact, it's one of the biggest areas that for a long time people have been working on, both from the HCI point of view and also from the citizen science side. So we have a lot of papers on that, but it's still a big problem. And I can't resist putting in a little plug here. Where we don't have as many papers as I would like to see is on the sort of HCI perspective of some of these issues of getting people on board. This was one of the reasons why we tried in the presentation that I gave about the development of NatureNet for community-driven projects, why we tried to explore with asking people to submit to crowdsource design ideas, it only really partially worked for us because, as I mentioned, people got shy about doing it. In our particular case, we put in a lot of effort to encouraging people that any idea was an important idea and putting some examples of ideas out there so that people didn't feel that their ideas were silly or too trivial to mention. So those sorts of things helped a lot. And related to that, I mean, we were a fairly small project. So there's two things that I kind of feel about that is that if you work with something like iNaturalist that is already developed, you have a huge user population there, a really enormous user population. And if you're a tool, for example, there are certain groups of organisms like birds, where you put in a bird sighting and you will have people within a few hours responding to it. And one thing I didn't actually mention in this talk, but I could have done, is that iNaturalist has a reward system. So you get rewarded for help. You get rewarded for the number of observations that you make. You get rewarded for the accuracy of those observations, but you also get rewarded for helping others. And that's really important. So if you put in, an observation about, or I put in an observation about a toucan, for example, and you jump in and you say, well, this area, this toucan, yes, you're right about a toucan, but it's actually something toucan. Then you get some rewards for doing that, and they keep a kind of scoreboard. Now, I have mixed feelings about this. Some people love this, and some people don't. And if you look into iNaturalist and you look at the scoreboards, I wish I had a picture to show you handy. They do the top 500. And the person at the 500 point has literally thousands of observations. So it's extremely competitive. I mean, there are millions of people across the world, and it's very competitive. Some people are put off by something being so competitive, but some people are kind of challenged by it. But it's an idea that you could take and apply to a smaller community, as your local community. The problem with working with a brand new project is it does take a lot of time to get people involved. And so you have to be prepared for a lot of upfront support, which is quite difficult. I mean, one of the messages that we're putting into our last paper on that project is that actually we were quite a big project by NSF standards. We were 2.5 million, which by the particular, it's not big compared with some of the projects on robotics and stuff like that, but for an HCI project, it was quite big. But we realized that we were quite short of resources to do a lot of that in-depth community work, working with people, helping people get onboarded onto the system. Oh, and the other thing I really need to mention is that my last PhD student, who is Brazilian, I don't know if any of you know her, I should give you her name, Marina Casquez Cordosa. She is finishing off her PhD at the moment, and her PhD is on onboarding. So she will be defending her PhD on the 1st of December, we hope. And I think at the moment she's not up for taking much extra email. She texted me earlier and said she's just writing and exhausted. But after she's defended, maybe she would be available to be in touch with some of you.
Oh, it would be great.
Maybe you'll get her to give a talk. It's very interesting work.
Jenny, we have a lot of questions and a lot of compliments to your talk. People are amazed. They say wonderful talk, many thanks. Thank you very much for the excellent and inspiring talk. It's been an honor having you again with us, and we hope we can welcome you to Brazil in person soon. André says this. But unfortunately, our
Yeah, program.
I forgot the name.
Is your program.
Our translator has a different event now.
Right.
We should write it up. We are amazed by your talk. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. We are definitely inspired. I definitely want some of my students, PhD students, to go into this area. It's really amazing. And if you want to join us at our program, you have access to Hoping, and please be there. We would be delighted. Thank you very much once again for your presence and your amazing talk.
Thank you to Sienna. Thank you to the interpreters. I think they need a big clap. Thank you very much to the, and thank you to everybody, and have a wonderful conference. I think your papers are in Portuguese, but I will certainly look at the proceedings.
I have some of them in English.
Okay, I will definitely look. I have another appointment now, but I'm deeply honored to be invited back. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.